Welcome to Commercial Real Estate Pro Network CREPN Radio. Thanks for joining us. My name is J. Darren Gross. This is the podcast focused on commercial real estate investment and risk management strategies. Weekly, we have conversations with commercial real estate investors and professionals who provide their experience and insight to help you grow your real estate portfolio. Today, my guest is Nick Prefontaine. Nick is part of the Smart Real Estate Coach family located in Newport, Rhode Island. He recently co-authored the best-selling book, The New Rules of Real Estate Investing. 24 leading experts reveal their real estate secrets. And in just a minute, we're going to speak with Nick about overcoming adversity and breaking through your limiting beliefs so you can build your real estate portfolio. But first, a quick reminder, if you like our show, CREPN Radio, there are a couple things you can do to help. You can like, share, and subscribe, and we hope you would consider leaving a comment. We'd love to hear from our listeners. Also, if you'd like to see how handsome our guests are, be sure to check out our YouTube channel, and you can find us on YouTube at Commercial Real Estate Pro Network. And if you would, please subscribe. We'd love to have grow the subscription and attract more viewers as well. With that, I want to welcome my guest, Nick. Welcome to CREPN Radio.
Hi, Darren. I'm very happy to be here with you and your listeners.
Well, I'm so glad we're able to do this. I'm looking forward to our talk today. But before we get started, if you could take just a minute and share with the listeners a little bit about your background.
All right. I really think that's really the part of the reason why I'm with you, Darren, and is to talk a little bit about my background and kind of how I get into what I'm doing. So, I actually in 2003 I was in a snowboarding accident, went off a jump, landed on my head, and I was in a coma for 3 weeks, and I had to learn how to walk, talk, and eat again. So, on that day, the February 5th, 2003 of my accident, I remember the reason I was going to the mountain was I was with my ski club. I remember that my friends and I, we were very proactive, meaning that we brought all of our snowboarding gear onto the bus to get ready so as not to miss a precious moment once we got to the mountain. So getting ready on the bus, I noticed that I had forgot one thing that I usually brought to ski club, not all the time, but usually, and that was my helmet. I didn't really think anything of it because, I was just going to be careful. Nothing ever happened. I'd be fine. So we got to the mountain, and because we were ready, headed straight for the top. On the way to the top, though, we noticed that it was very icy because it had been raining. People were wiping out everywhere. But needless to say, it wasn't my first year or first time on a snowboard. I knew what I was doing on a snowboard. So I got to the top and buckled in and headed straight for the biggest jump with all my speed. All the while before that, and part of the reason that drove me to want to go towards that jump was because all of my friends were saying, anyone who hit that jump right now would be crazy because it was the biggest jump in the terrain park. Going up to the jump, I caught the edge of my snowboard, which threw me off balance a little. I was too close to the top of that jump to stop, and I was going way too fast to even think about being able to stop. So in the air, I went off, and the people who can't see me, I'm showing the motion of what my body did, and that was my body inverting basically to landing right on my head. Now, I was told that I landed on my head and I wasn't wearing a helmet. One of the things that happened when I later found this out, one of the things that happened when I fell, although I didn't have a helmet on, the goggles, one of the things there's 2 or 3 things that I can point to that saved my life in that moment. One of those was my goggles that I was wearing, even though they weren't a helmet, obviously, but they were very thick goggles. They were called Spies. They were very thick goggles with a lot of padding. I was told that with each impact, even after the initial impact, those goggles would rotate to where the next impact was going to be to cushion my fall a bit. It was much too windy for them to life flight me. UMass Medical Center and the paramedics wanted to life flight me, like bring a helicopter in, but it was much too windy for that. So they had to send a team of paramedics up to the hill to get me and bring me down. And then because I had such a fall, I had to be intubated right on the spot, which for those of you listeners who don't know what that is, when you get in a serious accident like that, that's part of the procedure that they have to do to allow you to breathe. It's basically to paralyze you. I found out later, Darren, that there's only 1 or 2 of the paramedics, the staff of 6 that has the know-how to intubate right on the spot. Fortunate for me, that person was working that day. So as you can see, a bunch of things were, playing out in my favor, which I'm very fortunate because I got to the ICU, the intensive care unit at UMass, and the doctors told my parents that, well, we don't know when he's going to come out of the coma, but if he does, we don't really know if he'll be able to walk, talk, or eat on his own. That was very early on in my recovery that they shared that prognosis, and I was actually very fortunate that my parents, anytime the doctors would come into my room at the ICU to share news like that, they would start to tell my parents what was going on, and my parents always said, no, not here, not in front of him, because even though I was in a coma, I was still taking information in. So they made the doctors go with them outside the hospital room whenever it was to share information about how grim the forecast was, especially in the beginning. After I was stabilized, and when I say in a coma, it was a partially induced coma, because they said that from the impact alone, Darren, that I would have been out for 10 to 14 days just from the impact alone. However, after that, the swelling was such in my brain and with my head that if it increased any more, even a small bit, if it increased a little bit, I would have died. So those are the 3 things. I always have trouble if I don't go slow during the beginning with telling the story correctly. I always have trouble, like, wait, I thought there was 3, and like retracing my steps. So that's the 3rd thing. So they had to induce me into a coma to allow the swelling in my brain to come down. Then after I was stabilized, approximately a month later, I don't remember a month, basically that month of my life is gone. I can't recall that. I don't remember that. And it's really interesting because I've been back to the ICU, to that unit at UMass, and I went back there a couple years after I recovered from my accident for a groundbreaking ceremony that I was a part of. And I went, and that was my first time walking through the unit. When I walked through the unit, I was like, oh, you look really familiar. Like, you look really familiar. I feel like I've been here before, like the whole layout, but I couldn't really put my finger on it. And that's because like unconsciously, I do recall being there, but just consciously it wasn't happening because I've seen videos of myself when I was at UMass in the ICU and my eyes were open, but I don't remember any of that time because I was coming off of being induced in a coma. So it was like the lights were on, but no one was home, kind of thing. And then after I was stabilized, like I was saying, Darren, approximately a month later, I was moved to Franciscan Children's Hospital in Boston. They were actually right in Brighton, Mass. And that's where I started my journey. That's where I had to learn how to walk, how to talk, how to eat on my own. And I remember I always tell this story because it sticks out in my mind as a big turning point. Whenever someone meets me today and they learn about my story, they always say, "Oh, I'm glad you made it." I say, "Yeah, me too."
Right.
But the thing that always sticks out is everyone always asked me, like, you have such a a powerful story, and you were so strong going through it. You're so much stronger because of it. But was there ever that moment of doubt? And we all have doubt. This is why I like to share this. And it was very early on in my recovery, in between therapies, because my days were, just to give you a glimpse, I would have to get up. I needed help getting showered, um, because I had to learn how to do that again too. So I would take a shower with the physical therapist would help me take a shower and teach me the order of things that you have to do and everything like that. Then after that, I would have sessions of physical, occupational, and speech therapy. Then I would go to lunch, and this moment came at that when I was in a break at lunch and I was still in a wheelchair. I still was only able to produce a whisper of my voice, of talking. And I remember just kind of looking at my situation. I don't know what it was. And I looked at my legs in the wheelchair and I looked over at my mom and I'm like, "Mom, am I ever going to be able to walk again?" And she said, "Yeah, of course you are. That's like, why would you ask? That's why we're here, so you can get everything back and then we can just go back home and go on with everything." And it was that confidence, and that she was so sure that, yeah, that's what we're doing here, that you're going to learn everything again and then we're going to go back so we can go home and everything. And that moment always sticks out to me because I'm not saying that there was never any doubt after that, but that was a big portion. And everyone, and I'm sure your listeners can, and you could agree, that everyone has doubts. Everyone, yeah, you set a goal and you're working towards it, but everything isn't rosy all the time. Everyone has their doubts. So I always like to share that with people so they understand that I'm a real person. And, I did at one point have doubt going through that experience. Then kind of fast forward a few months and I ran out of the hospital. So I believe the day was April 24th of 2003, I ran out of Franciscan Children's Hospital. And on the day that I ran out, we went down to the local pizza shop right down the street from the hospital. And I realized a couple of goals that day. I realized my food goal. Now I say my food goal because I couldn't swallow. I had to be fed through a tube at the beginning to get all my nutrients and everything. And so I always had that goal of a Coke and a grinder. Now, a grinder, for those non-New Englanders out there, is like a sub, like a big sub,
Right.
like a
Hoagie.
turkey or a meatball or something like that. but so that was always a goal of mine. And actually, while I'm talking about this, and I haven't even talked about this on an interview before, with the feeding tube, it was very early on in my recovery, but my mom, who was with me every day, said, you don't really need that anymore, because I was starting to eat solid foods and everything. So she said, you don't need that anymore. And at the time, I wasn't able to talk. I was only able to like mouth things. There was like no volume, and it was really kind of holding me back. So she started to pull it out. I was like, yeah, I was like, go ahead. Like, that's fine, 100%. So she took it out. And by the time she got like right here, my eyes started to get really wide, because I didn't know it went that far. I was as it got farther, like my eyes got wider and wider. And then when the nurses later that night came in to check on me, they said, Nick, what happened to your feeding tube? And remember, I couldn't talk. So I just went like this. And we rehearsed that, the shoulder shrug, I don't know. I'm not sure what happened. So my goal was always a Coke and a grinder. So on the day that I ran out of the hospital, first we walked right next door to the local pizza shop, had my Coke and the grinder. Then from there, I ran. That's where we filmed that video that I ran out of the hospital. Now, I did have to go back inside to still get my stuff, but it was like it was a big moment. It was because I realized my goal that I was working for that whole time. So that was pretty cool.
Oh, that's awesome. My wife, she's not practicing now, but when we first met, she was a physical therapist, and I can remember numerous times we'd be out in public, and somebody'd come up to her and give her the biggest hug, and it was about kind of like the story. I mean, she would tell me the story, and a lot of times it was about something very similar to you. I mean, the fact that normal day, major, just a weird fluke of a thing happened, and all of a sudden, whether they're a TBI or a spinal cord injury or something, and just how much of life we take for granted. uh you know and how old were you on the day that this happened in 2003?
I was 14.
Okay. 14-year-old. Most 14-year-olds, I've got a 15 and a 17-year-old, they don't have a concern in the world. I mean, it's just not, there's certain things you're supposed to do, but to have any kind of concerns of like any of the things you take for granted could be taken from you is just the farthest thing. And then from that moment to where, when you said you have that conversation with your mom about, am I going to be able to do this again? That's pretty enlightening, that all of a sudden now, as a 14-year-old, you do have some sort of a question or a doubt of, what am I going to be able to make it? So over 2 months later, you run out of the hospital. From that day when you're asking your mom, am I going to be able to walk? Was your progress, was it, I mean, like minimal daily, or can you describe some of the progress? Because I think that's something people forget about.
Yeah,
How
that's interesting. Interesting that you asked that, because when I was going through it, I was, oh my God, it was like years. Like I spent years in the hospital. But in reality, I got moved to Franciscan. I believe that was on March 4th or 5th. And then I ran out of Franciscan on April 24th. So under 2 months, but going through that, it felt like 2 years, honestly, because it seemed like a lot, because I had to learn everything again. It just, time moved very slowly. Whenever, and I know this now, that everything goes really fast. Like, things go faster as you get as you get older and get busy and everything. But that was a time in my life when everything just stopped, basically. And it's that time, it might as well have been 2 years actually going through that. So yeah, the progress was very quickly. I progressed very quickly. It didn't feel like it at the time, but yeah. And then when I ran out of the hospital, it wasn't like the work was done. Okay, you're all set. I had to go back home, and my school where I was in 8th grade at the time, said, oh, don't worry about it. You know, you had a major injury. Don't worry about it. What you can do is come back next year and just take the 8th grade over. I really, Darren, I didn't want to do that. I wanted to be able to graduate with my classmates. So what I did was I would go in the mornings, and I wasn't able to sit in normal classes. Remember, I had to get caught up and everything. So I would sit with a private tutor at the school. So I would get up, then I would go to school for a few hours. I believe it was around the time of 9 or 9:30 to 11:30 or 12. And then I would have private tutor sessions to get caught up. Now, I was able to, a few months later, graduate and walk at the ceremony with my 8th grade class, but the work wasn't done for me. I had to have a different tutor come to my house 5 days a week for 2 or 3 hours a day, every day, in order for me to pass the 8th grade. But I was able to do that, and I was able to go on to start freshman year with my class. But when I got home, the days looked like this. I would get up, go to school from that 9 to 11:30 window, get tutored for 2 hours. Then I would get to have lunch with my classmates, which was the most important thing in my day. I love that because I wasn't able to see them for months. So I would go to lunch with them. And then after that, my mom would pick me up, and we would go to outpatient therapy. My outpatient therapy was sessions of physical, occupational, and speech therapy. So I didn't have to do them double sessions like it was when I was an inpatient, but I did have to do them 5 days a week, every day, until 6 months later when I was 100% cleared. And still, really, the work wasn't done after that. I went privately and saw physical therapists to get additional exercises and additional things that was going to help me continue to strengthen and keep my body up and going. And so then I had freshman year at Shrewsbury High School. I had actually got into a private all-boys school, Catholic private all-boys school, St. John's High School. I got in there prior to my accident, but my parents weren't sure if I could handle it after getting in my accident. So I started at Shrewsbury High School, and once I was there for 6 months, or not 6 months, but once I was there for like 3 or 4 months, I was like, I don't like that. Like, I want to be challenged. So I arranged to transfer into St. John's for my sophomore year. And part of the reason why I went to Shrewsbury for that freshman year was to get my IEP set up, individual education plan, because if I just went to St. John's, they wouldn't have that. So I had to get that set up first, transferred into there, and then only 2 years later, Darren, I was starting to get the itch, and I was reading a lot of books, a lot of real estate books, and the one that really caught my interest was Cash Flow Quadrant by Robert Kawasaki. And I started asking my dad questions like because he had a real estate investment company at the time, and I started asking him questions like, how can I help and what can I do? How can I get involved? That kind of thing. Right around that time, I started asking him questions. I was about 16 years old, and he was starting to experiment with the idea of having several people door knocking pre-foreclosure doors. Like you would get a list of people that have received a notice of default letter from the bank, meaning they had missed 1, 2, 3, or even up to 10 to 12 in those days payments, and the bank still hadn't foreclosed. So I would get that list and I would go to the areas where I could knock out the most amount of doors in a day. And that translated, I didn't realize it at the time, but that translated to not the best areas. Like not good areas of cities. But anyway, so I did that, and I was able to, when I first started, I was just handed a script and told, all right, you go and knock on the door and you read the script, that kind of thing. And then when I started doing that, I just wasn't seeing a lot of success. I get a lot of doors slammed in my face. And then shortly after that, my cousin and I, Mike, we flew out to San Diego to shadow the top guy in the country who was having success doing door knocking these pre-foreclosure doors. Once I saw his approach and how it differed from mine, and how it was vastly different. There were so many things. There were like, he would go up, knock on the door lightly, like a friend was stopping by, take a few steps back, and then they come to the door, look on either side. Hey, I'm not sure if I have the right address. Could you help me out? And then he'd show them the list, the notice of default list that he was working off of. And once they saw their name, they would light up and tell him what they were doing to fix a problem, what happened, and why the bank was, terrible SOB and everything. And as you can imagine, but the success rate that he was having was just like, wow, okay, I'm going to change to do it that way. So once I got back, I started doing that, and saw a lot of success with that. I continued the rest of high school doing that. Then when I graduated high school, after I graduated, I started studying to get my real estate license. 2008, March 2008, I got my real estate license. I know, settle down. It was a great time to get your real estate license.
Right.
It was kind of before the proverbial shit hit the fan, though. It was still, things were still buzzing. And so I was a realtor full bore really for about 6 years of that, going full-time realtor, making a living, doing the whole deal, prospecting and, door knocking, doing that whole thing. But I was able to make a living, and I was able to support myself on just my activities. So to me, there was a lot of pride involved in that. Like I didn't need any help or anything. Like I took a lot of pride out of that. Then if you, good, I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to ask you, the your injury and recovery story. We talked a little bit about just the amount of work. I mean, you talked about how not only to get from the ICU to the hospital, then from the hospital to get released from the hospital, then from home to just to catch up. I mean, all the work and just the amount of work and the focus and all of the effort. I mean, I think a lot of times when people they're not in that situation, they don't understand all the work that goes into to get back to where your base.
Yeah.
But then it sounds like even in this door knocking thing, you were going and knocking as many doors as you could, and initially not having the success that you eventually had after you saw how somebody else did it. But I'm assuming that the repetition of it and just staying focused and staying committed to it, as opposed to going, this isn't working, this blows. I mean, if you'd done that when you were in the hospital, I mean, you likely wouldn't be walking, you wouldn't be able to live on your own, kind of thing. I mean, if you'd stop there, kind of thing. If you hadn't, committed yourself in the schoolwork, kept up with your class, if you hadn't, gone and learned from this other person and really kind of honed your craft, I mean, I'm assuming there is a parallel in all of those as far as just the focus and the work to get the results.
There's a thread. Yeah, absolutely there is a thread in all of that. And that even what we're doing today, with real estate, like the associates that we work with and all across the country who are doing it, it's so funny, Darren, because we say all the time, it's not just me, that someone new starts out, or maybe not even so new. A few months, goes by and they're working, they're doing the right things, and then they get it. Like, good news, they got a deal. But then there's so much more, like, follow up and more things that need to, like, there's so many layers to what they have to learn in order to be a successful real estate investor. And I'm just really, I don't know. I'm really, like, amazed at the fact that people when they first start out are like, all right, good, I did the work. Like, when am I getting my check? Kind of thing. And it's like, no, it takes a lot of follow up on everything. You gotta stay on everything. And that common thread is what you picked up on, what I was talking about through my recovery and everything. It's just, you have to keep going. And I say it to buyers all the time. Let's just take this one step at a time. All you have to worry about right now is going to see the house. Then if you're interested, get me some forms back, and then we can talk in more detail. But if I told everyone, and even our associates, if I told them, or if any of us at Smart Real Estate Coach told them everything that's involved right at the beginning, there probably wouldn't be as many people that we're working with today because of that. But because we spoon feed people the right amount of information, they're able to realize their goals and to have success, because all you have to worry about is doing the next step in front of you. And for me, those next steps were, there was quite a few, and there continues to be those next steps.
Yeah, I always love that question, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time, right?
Yeah.
And just, I think, like you mentioned, is that, staying committed, staying focused, and recognizing you have to do it over and over and over again and stay with it. It's easy to get discouraged. What are some of the things that you see when you're talking with others, or some of your students or your associates? Is there a common limiting belief?
I would say something that we come up against a lot is the fact that someone thinks, well, I have to have all the information before I take action. So I'll have to gather all the information about the property. I'll have to get the mortgage information. I'll have to get everything before I take that first step and pick up the phone and make a call. And that really couldn't be farther from the truth. They just, the limited information, just the name, number, and what the address is, and give them a call. And that comes down to anything, any kind of tough conversation. It's just taking action. So I would say lack of taking action. Like, not taking action, thinking there are more important things than lead generation.
Right. No, that is, I think that's true in my life. Certainly, it's easy to get overwhelmed thinking like I can make a small problem a really big problem, as opposed to, doing that first step, and usually it usually involves engaging somebody.
Mm-hmm.
So whether it be a property owner or what have you, but you know, engaging someone in laying it out. And I like the example, like you were describing with the person in San Diego, how they would ask, I don't know if I'm in the right place, but having that kind of a sense of, I don't know everything, is your your first step, as opposed to trying to be the expert on everything, because you know, it's tough to be an expert on everything, or you know, even all the way through on anything.
Yeah.
But I think people are a lot more at ease if you have some sort of a sense of you don't know, and you're comfortable in that, as opposed to I think you can you know, off put people when you're um, you know, when you're trying to to assert authority in a situation. So
Yeah, and I mean that's 100% accurate, because I think at the beginning I was treating it exactly like you're saying, like rushing up to the door saying, I'm here to help you out of your unfortunate situation. But then I just kind of, once I learned Colin's approach, I took a step back and kind of like, could you help me out? And someone, you know, the majority of people out there they'll help someone if, you know, most of the people out there are good people, you know?
yeah, I do believe that. I think that most people are inclined to do good.
Yeah.
You know, there's always a few that recognize that and are willing to take advantage of that. But I think that if in the main you recognize that people, and for the most part, are you know, trying to do good
For the most, yeah,
and
exactly.
willing to help. You know, I think that
Mhm.
was kind of an interesting question. You know, can you help me here? That's a pretty disarming question right there.
Mhm.
Um, so your experience in working with your associates in that, um, is there any kind of a I mean, you mentioned about do the next right thing, or just do that the next step. Um, what do you say to people when they ask about how long is it going to take? You know, how long is it going to take to get where I want to go?
Totally depends on their goals, their level of commitment, how much time they have available to throw at this venture. I mean, a lot of the people that come into our fold are people that do have like a corporate job, but their end goal is they want to leave that once, you know, once they have an income from their real estate business that's able to support them. And we've actually been able to come up with a plan and have we just had another one of our associates, Brian, a few weeks ago give his final notice to his company, and it's happening regularly now with our associates. So a lot of our associates are realizing that dream that they had, being able to give their final notice. One of our top associates and coach, he actually would he was in the produce business, in the I forget, I'm drawing a blank right now, but he had a busy season and he had to commute 2 hours to work, and that's one way. He would make calls. He would drive with his brother. He would make calls on the way to work and on the way home from work. And then eventually he was able to walk away and do his real estate business full time. And he's one of our coaches now as well.
That's awesome. That's awesome. But it sounds like, you know, even kind of like we talked about you, uh, 2 hours he put in the work and kind of had the goal and stuck with it. And now he's, and I'm assuming he learned a lot along the way, um, you know, as he continued to do it, you know, kind of fine tune, like you were talking about door knocking and stuff. You know, the repetition kind of helps you kind of recognize the errors, or where you have success, and you can fine tune it and stuff. And
Oh,
that's,
absolutely. And I
yeah.
found that with anything. I found that with telemarketing or and like anything. If I have to call a bunch of people, I'm not going to really get my legs under me until I've had 5 to 10 calls, and then I'm going to say to myself, well, I want to keep going now. I'm in a rhythm. I feel good about this. So I actually end up doing more than I set out to do in the beginning. Same thing was for me when I was a realtor. First learning how to brand new realtor, how to cold call and everything. I would do just that. It's just repetition. just keep doing it, and you get better with repetition.
Right. No, I know that. I know that well. Kind of the first couple are not my best, but as you get going, you kind of get a groove and keep going.
Yep.
Hey, Nick, if we could, I'd like to shift gears here for a second. By day, I'm an insurance broker, and I work with clients to assess risk and determine what to do with the risk. And there's three strategies we typically consider. The first is we look and see, can we avoid the risk? If that's not an option, we look to see if we can minimize the risk. And when neither of those are an option, we look to see if we can transfer the risk. And that's what an insurance policy is. And I like to ask my guests if they can take a look at their situation, whether it be their own personal situation, or in your case, your associates, or even your clients. And if you can assess or consider what you think is the biggest risk. And for clarity, I'm not necessarily looking for an insurance related answer, but if you're willing, I'd like to ask you, Nick Prefontaine, what is the biggest risk?
The biggest risk is analysis paralysis. So not taking action. Thinking that you have to learn X, Y, Z, or you have to do something else or get to a certain point before you're ready to take action. I just think that paralyzes people into not getting results if they're not taking action. So one of the things that I always say is ready, fire, aim. Like just get started, and then once you're started, you can course correct. And that's been my whole career. Door knocking, like I said, I get out there. I failed a bunch of times. I had limited information about what to do, but then once I had something to go off of, then I was able to fine tune it and get better and better. Same thing with cold calling and prospecting as a realtor. Once I got started, I was able to adjust and get better. Then there was a time when I didn't know. I work primarily with the buyers in our business, the rent home buyers, and kind of out of working with them, I distilled or developed a process that you have to put everyone through to ensure that they're able to be successful and get to the end of their lease and be able to get their own loan and get across the finish line. But there was a time when I didn't know any of that. My dad listened to some of my first calls. There was a time I didn't know any of that. So I just start. That's my thing. Like, take action.
Yeah, there's no teacher like failure, right?
Mm-hmm.
So don't be afraid to fail. Hey, Nick, where can the listeners go if they would like to learn more or connect with you?
Yeah. Great. They can go to our website, which is smartrealestatecoach.com. And we actually have a webinar on there that tells if anything of what I mentioned rings true with any of your listeners out there. They can go to that website, smartrealestatecoach.com, get registered for the webinar. It lays out everything of our business. And if they're interested, they'll know how to take the next step at the end. What comes with that for registering, because they registered for the webinar, is a free strategy call with one of our team members here. And that's the best way to get in contact with us. And then if they want to pick up a free copy of our best-selling book, The New Rules of Real Estate Investing, and when I say free, Darren, I mean 100% free, not say yes and then we'll charge you $10 for shipping, where it's 100% free. They can go to newrulesforfree.com and submit their info there and get a free copy sent out to them. And I'll just repeat that. It's newrulesforfree.com. Just, with the whole COVID and the coronavirus going on, just, be patient. I'm not sure if it's going to get right out to you the day after you submit your info, but we'll definitely get it out to you. That's the best way. It's the best way to get started, I would say.
Awesome. Well, that will be listed in the show notes. Nick, I can't say thanks enough for taking the time to talk today. I've enjoyed our talk and have learned a lot, and I hope we can do it again soon.
Me too, Darren. Thank you.
All right. For our listeners, if you like this episode, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Remember, the more you know, the more you grow. That's all we've got this week. Until next time, thanks for listening to Commercial Real Estate Pro Network's CREPN Radio.